Joining us now, we have Xolani Fakude, who is Sadtu's Secretariat officer, and he joins us via Skype. Good to have you, Xolani. Thanks very, very much. And also joining us via Skype, we've got Equal Education's Secretary General, Noncedo Madubedube. Good to have you, Noncedo. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, let's talk to Sadtu first. Now, it wasn't so long ago that Sadtu didn't actually have a problem with the reopening of schools. Why the change of mood? What's happened?
Well, thank you once again, Leanne. Firstly, let me greet you. Let me greet the viewers as well. Let me greet Noncedo from Equal Education. The fact of the matter, Leanne, is that we woke up this morning to a very, very grim reality. The grim reality that South Africa is actually climbing the rankings, the global rankings in terms of infections. You were actually alarmed this morning yourself when you said that we have now just surpassed the United Kingdom. We might actually reach the top 5 in the next few days or so if the projections are anything to go by. So the reality of the matter is that when we first started with these discussions around the lockdown, start the table, no less than 14 minimum conditions that we said must be met in order for the environment to be optimal. However, some of those have not necessarily been met satisfactorily, and to compound that particular factor is that there is evidence that suggests that indeed there is an increase of community transmissions. And what we are saying, Leanne, is that we should not find ourselves under pressure as a country to start an academic year in January and finish in December religiously whilst we've got a crisis on our hands. We are saying as Sadtu, let us suspend schooling activities until such a time that we have gone past the peak of the pandemic.
Yeah. Xolani, I'm going to just debate you a little bit on this, because we always knew that this was going to be the peak, and we had been warned over and over again that this was going to be the time where we would see the numbers in South Africa increasing at a rapid rate, albeit obviously we're living it, so we're now seeing it all happening. But, you know, I'm still trying to understand why you were in support of schools going back, where there were other unions that were actually taking government to task and to court to say, we cannot do this to educators and to learners. But you on the other side saying, no, we can. I'm just really trying to understand what has actually taken you by surprise. This is not unexpected that the surge is upon us at this time.
Well, Leanne, firstly, maybe let us correct a few things. It is the prerogative of the minister and the cabinet to make a decision on the opening and the closing of schools. What Sadtu said, along with 4 other unions that are recognized in the Education Labour Relations Council, was that we are going to give the Minister of Basic Education the benefit of the doubt. The Minister of Basic Education and on numerous public platforms and made several commitments. Some of those was that there would be a delivery of psychosocial services, and a number of other. Those were the commitments that were made. And Sadtu said, along with other unions, that we are going to give the minister the benefit of the doubt, and we are going to observe on the ground as to what the developments are. Because here, we are actually working, as our president says, on changing the steering wheel of a moving car. And that is exactly what is happening. This is a moving target that we're changing. And the continuously changing dynamics on the ground, Leanne, such as the increasing community infections, are the very ones that are right now leading Sadtu to say that the dynamics have significantly changed. Yes, we're expecting it. And that is why we're extremely cautious at first. That is why we set 14 minimum conditions. That is why we said we're giving the minister the benefit of the doubt. But the reality on the ground right now, Leanne, is dictating otherwise. The WHO is advising us that if you are going to control, it is therefore not wise to have schools operating in the context of a comprehensive strategy. And that is what the position of Sadtu is at the moment. Okay.
Let me bring in Equal Education into the conversation. Noncedo, what is Equal Education's standpoint on this entire issue?
So, I mean, from the inception, I think we've always said that school communities need to lead decisions around whether schools stay open, which number of phased grades, what kind of support is in place, and that school readiness is a non-negotiable as put out by the Department of Basic Education. So I think it's just that teacher unions are stepping up to the plate and protecting teachers. Because what we've realized and what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is that the conversations on the ground inside school communities have stopped being about the provisions of PPE, school readiness, the state of sanitation facilities. but rather the psychosocial challenges, impact of being inside schools, while different areas become hotspots, there are raging and increasing cumulative numbers of COVID positive cases. Whether the teacher gets those inside school or not is irrelevant. So we're encouraging teacher unions as part of the sector to do what they need to do to protect teachers. What we have been grappling inside Equal Education with is that whilst aware that we're heading towards the peak, and this is going to be our reality in different forms and phases as seen in other countries for the next 18 months. You know, we might go into a next peak, especially because we're the most unequal country in the globe. Those kinds of peaks will affect us differently. We'll have dire circumstances in South Africa. What we've been pounding the Department of Basic Education, together with provincial education departments, is on 4 issues. The one is around the departments need to take school readiness seriously. Once media, for example, traditional media, takes their eyes off education for seconds at a time, school readiness becomes a joke, especially for rural provinces. But we still know of schools that are looking for scholar transport support, that are looking for water security, are looking for sanitation, adequate and safe sanitation facilities, that are still looking for the provision of PPEs for learners and staff inside school, and are desperately looking for channels and answers around how to access psychosocial support. The second is that the department has spoken to us about a risk-adjusted strategy to inform how schools are going to work the next period. We need this communicated with us as soon as possible. The department, the full NCC, the full NEC of the ANC government has known that we've got a peak emerging between July and September. This strategy should have been inside public consumption platforms a long time ago, and this is part of the anxiety. The third is that we understand that learners, in the backdrop of a humanitarian crisis around food insecurity in this country, must be fed as soon as possible, whether they're back at school or not. And so as the department urges back and forth between reopening and not opening, what we're saying is that there is no education system that is fully open or fully closed during this period. So communities must be able to guide their heads of departments and provinces with support from the Department of Basic Education to open as they should or wish, depending on their own context. The last thing that I just want to note quickly is that there seems to be a disjuncture in our Department of Education, which is scary, between the traditional role of school and the social benefit of the school community. So we know that our learners, for example, we did an internal survey, talked to about 485 learners across 133 schools. And over 80% of those learners said they wanted to be at school. And this is because folks understand school as a place to learn your basic and foundational skills, a place where you get critical knowledge, develop your own talent, build community. You get mediation support as well. So the blended learning approach is simply not suffice in the context of South Africa.
Yeah.
And learners want to go in for their one meal that they qualify for a day.
I think you've really outlined a lot of the issues that many people are thinking and speaking to as well. I'm going to come back to you, but I just want to go back to you again, Xolani, and I want to speak to you about the transparency of the Department of Education. Some unions, the one union that I am going to be quoting is the National Teachers Union, and its president, Alan Thompson, is very concerned about the data that the Department of Education have actually been supplying South Africans and unions as well. They're saying that, there are still no accurate figures around the infection rate amongst teachers or educators as well as learners. And whenever asked, they're always saying that they contracted it, but they didn't get it at school. It may have happened somewhere else. And, there's never a direct answer to that question. And that question's been asked many, many times. So I asked you, Xolani, the statistics and the figures that you've been given by the Department of Education, what do you believe they look like? I mean, how many schools are open, how many have closed, and how many educators and learners have actually been infected through going to school and having coronavirus?
Well, that is a very, very important question that you are asking, Leanne. And indeed, Natu is also correct. We have always said that what is important and what matters the most as we all collectively try to manage this pandemic is about how we share the information. We are saying that it must be on the basis of transparency. It must be on the basis of verifiable data from the ground. Now, let me give you a very, very glaring example of some of the inconsistencies that we have now found ourselves under. When the minister made a pronouncement that the second cohort of the schools of the grades are going to schools, including the grade Rs, you would have noticed provinces, actually a majority of the provinces came out and said that, no, but we are not ready to receive this 8 hours because we are still suffering. We are still struggling with managing the situation around the first cohort. Now, that tells you that there is already such a gap between a national government and the provincial departments of basic education. And that is part of the issue that really increases the anxiety that we are faced with, Elian. So what we are saying is that consultation, the sharing of information is quite important. We are continuing actually to even run surveys on the ground ourselves as teacher unions. And I can tell you that in yesterday's NEC meeting, we read condolence messages of close to 250 educators. The number continues to rise that have already succumbed to the COVID pandemic. So we are indeed having the evidence that suggests that we are seeing an increase in the number of transmissions, both in schools, in communities. And what is also important is that we must be clear. A school is a microcosm of the society. Indeed, we do accept it. But there is no way in which we can see an increase in community transmission confidently told by government leaders, and yet you expect something different at the level of the school. So what we are saying, in fact, on the department, and we have said that currently effective teaching and learning is not taking place, Leanne. It cannot take place under the conditions of the anxiety that parents face, the anxiety that learners face, and teachers face as well. Schools have been opening and reclosing on a very, very, very regular basis. As I speak right now, in the area of Delmas in Mpumalanga, community members have taken a stand decision to say that they are going to close down the schools around that area. The schools in the area of around Carletonville are not operating. The schools around Tshwane are having a serious problem. The schools in the Eastern Cape that were supposed to open, or that's part of the second phase of the cohort of the learners, have still not opened. So that is telling you that the decisions, or the data on which the decisions are made by the Minister of Basic Education is not necessarily consistent. It's actually contradictory, very real conditions on the ground that teachers are facing on a daily basis.
You know, Noncedo, I'm going to come to you as well, and try and keep your answers as short as possible. We're running into trouble with time. The World Health Organization, and I quote what they said in their bi-weekly media briefing. This was yesterday. They didn't mince their words at all. They said that the reopening of schools in any country is only safe in the context of low community transmissions of COVID-19. Now, that in itself is a statement that we need to take very, very seriously. All the education department needs to take very, very seriously, because at this point in time, community transmission is high, and there's no getting away from it. What are your views on the World Health Organization's warnings as well?
So we've been following that as well, and we know that there's emerging medical evidence around the change in nature of the virus and its kickback effect, so how it comes back twofold for children and adults alike. And what we've been encouraging the Department of Basic Education to do is put forward medical evidence first in substantiating their rationale around their risk-adjusted strategy. Which schools open during which alert level, for example. And we haven't been able to get clear answers from the Department of Basic Education on this fact. So I do think as soon as our government isn't driven by the economy in order to open up different sectors of society and is able to put in place these bare essentials as non-negotiables inside our school communities, will be in a better foot. And that's our call and demand to the Department of Basic Education, together with MECs and teacher unions, because you have periodical joint meetings. So we need to be making these assertions inside those spaces if you've got the voice and the capacity and the clout.
Yeah, and then finally, also very quickly, Xolani, we've got a minute to news. Now, one thing the World Health Organization did say as well is that schools must not be used as a political tool. And I think everybody comes out very strongly in favor of that, but unfortunately, this doesn't appear to be the case. And the other issue, if you can also answer this for me, is that, you know, what's coming up very strongly as the reason, not just from Sadtu, is that our education system is highly unequal. We know this, and therefore South Africa could be put under immense pressure to make sure that disadvantaged schools are not left behind. And it is clear that tuition continues in more affluent schools. We know this. They're working online. They can close. But it's an unequal society. What do we do? It's easy to just close a school, but what happens to the education and academic year?
Well, the Sadtu has already made a number of proposals because we are equally concerned. We said as a union that strategies that we come up with jointly, they must not deepen the inequalities. And that is precisely what has been happening, as you are rightfully so saying. And we have made a number of suggestions. One of those suggestions, Len, by the way, bring on board the platforms such as yourselves, the SABC, the public broadcaster, because we are saying that there should be access to learning resources. When we speak about open source learning resources as well, there must be that kind of access so that even those who are in the far-flung areas, in the rural areas, in the township schools can equally also access that kind of the education. So indeed, we agree with a number of the issues that the World Health Organization has been saying, and that is why Sadtu is saying that the lives of our members, the lives of our learners are absolutely sacrosanct, and we are going to do everything in our power actually defend and protect those.
All right. We both thank you. Thank you very, very much. This is just the start of the discussion. We are going to, of course, be talking to a lot more individuals and get their voices about the education system and moving forward. But talking to us now was Equal Education's Secretary General, Noncedo, Madubedube, and Xolani Fakude, who is Sadtu's Secretariat Officer. Do stay tuned. In the next hour, we, of course, will be talking to education experts and professors with regard to the health implications thereof. So do stay tuned. But right now...